Do a review in Likutei Sichos in Chelek Chof, Volume 20. This is the second Sicha for the Parshas Mikeitz. In the Parsha, when Yosef was preparing the meal for his brothers, so over there is a hint that for Shabbos, it says, Utvoyach Tevach V'hochin. And the Rebbe's discussion evolves around what is it, specifically the mitzvah of Shabbos uniqueness that Yosef kept it. The Pasuk discusses about it. What about all the other mitzvahs? We know they must have done the other mitzvahs too. And what about the other brothers? Was it just Yosef? It seems like the Medrash gives Yosef. The Rebbe will discuss the various things in the Shabbos. The Rebbe's point is that in essence, Shabbos was there from the time the Eibishter created the world. The reason we have Shabbos is because Sheishis Yomim Osa Hashem as Hashemayim. So the entity, the concept of Shabbos, of resting, is there from the beginning. But that was a godly thing. That was Hashem resting. It had no connection to the people. But then, when the Eibishter gave the Shabbos, then the Yidden have that special the Torah, the special Shmiras Shabbos. But the idea over here is that Yosef, the fact that it was already an entity of Shabbos in the world, that has a unique and special place. And that's why the emphasis and the pasuk and the strength of this Shabbos specifically, notwithstanding the fact that Yosef did all the other mitzvahs as well, and the brothers did the other mitzvahs as well, because in there, the entity of the mitzvah wasn't there, but by Shabbos, the entity of Shabbos was there. But first, the Rebbe goes out to prove the fact that the Medrash doesn't mean to say that Yosef only did Shabbos, even though on the superficial language it seems like Moshe that Yosef kept Shabbos and not the brothers, but it seems in exclusion of the other mitzvahs. The Rebbe explains the Medrash is only saying that was the pasuk we find in the pasuk, not talking about whether Yosef did the other mitzvahs or the other Shvatim did the other mitzvahs, but that's only what we find in the pasuk. That's what the Medrash is talking about. And let's look inside now. Go step by step. Aleph. From pasuk Vayar Yosef Goimer Vayomer Laasher Beisay Goimer. Yosef saw his brothers, and then he tells his one who is in charge over his home. It says Utvoyach Tavach. They should slaughter a uh, slaughtering b'hochen, and they should prepare for the meal. But the preparation of a meal, we know on Shabbos, you don't cook. You have to prepare from before Shabbos. So the Medrash says, stated Medrash, so the Medrash states, v'hochen, it says, and prepare. Ein v'hochen, ella Shabbos. Prepare means Shabbos. You're preparing for Shabbos. When do we prepare? We prepare for Shabbos. At other times, we don't prepare. We do it then. But when do we prepare for Shabbos? On Friday, we prepare for Shabbos. Heich ma da'at Omar. This is that he says, V'hoyo b'yoyim hashishi. The Pasuk says, the people, when they were collecting the mon, it'll be on Friday, which they won't have mon on Shabbos. They'll only have on Friday. V'heichinu, so they should prepare. Also, heichinu hachin. They should prepare on Friday. Es asher yaviu. That's what they brought home on Friday for Shabbos. So you see, heichinu is preparation for Shabbos. Hado amra. So what does this tell us? Shashomar Yosef es Shabbos koidem shaloi tinose. That Yosef kept the Shabbos before the Shabbos was given. Okay, so this from this pasuk you see that Yosef kept Shabbos. So superficially, when you read it, it almost seems that the Medrash is trying to say that it was Yosef that kept the Shabbos. So first, that it was only he that kept the Shabbos, and he only kept Shabbos, not the other mitzvahs. That's the pasuk says, "Adam Rosh Hashanah Yosef es Shabbos," that he kept Shabbos, but not the other things. It would seem. Otherwise, what would be the Chiddush Shabbos? Sagt er vom Pashtus Loshen HaMedrash Kemen Atosom. From the simple language of the Medrash, one can make a mistake. As the Midvert gemeint that the Medrash means Oistel and Yosef and Lagabe seine Brüder to distinguish between Yosef and his brothers. And also on Shmira Shabbos Lagabe andere mitzvahs. And with regards to Yosef himself, that he kept the Shabbos, but not the other mitzvahs. Those haste, that would mean it was just Yosef. Yosef was unique. Only the andere Shvatim haben gehit Shabbos. Just he kept Shabbos, but not the other one. And only he gehit Shabbos when the andere mitzvah. He didn't keep the other mitzvahs. That's, you would think, because the Medrash singles out and says that Yosef did this mitzvah even though it wasn't given yet. Sheshomer Yosef Shabbos koidem shetinosin, that he kept the Shabbos before it was given. But the Rebbe says that this is something very difficult to say. Doesn't really fit, because we know the forefathers kept the mitzvahs, and for sure they would give it over, as it says by Avram, Asher Yitzabez Bonov, that he was going to command them, he's going to give them over the traditions. So it really doesn't fit that they didn't do the other mitzvahs, that Yosef didn't do the other mitzvahs, and the brothers didn't do the mitzvahs. Chazal Zogan, our sages of blessed memory say, as the Ovis have Obgihit, alla mitzvahs HaTorah, that the forefathers kept all the mitzvahs of the Torah. Hagam ze haben derif kensivu nit gehad, although they didn't have a command to keep the mitzvahs of the Torah. Und es steht by Avram, but it says by Avram, so we see that they did keep the mitzvahs, even though there was no command. Then what does it state by Avram? Leman asher yitzavez bonov vez beise achrov. Shem says, Ki daitiv, he loves Avram because so that Avram will instruct his son and his family that follow. He will instruct them to do the mitzvahs. Is zicher, so it's certain for sure, as euch by Yaakov and his given Yitzavez Bonov, that also by Yaakov also instructed his sons. And that would include alle Zionizim, all of his sons. Where Rashi schreibt beferish, Rashi says it very openly, Bepirush al-Ashas, in his commentary on the Gemara and the Gemara Chulin, Shebnei Yaakov Shemrei mitzvahs hoyu. Yaakov's sons were keeping mitzvahs. The Afal Pishale nit no Torah, for although the Torah was not given, Mukubolim hoyu ma'aviseyim, they had it by tradition from their fathers. So, therefore, it's hard to say, we can't say that the Medrash means that only Yosef did the mitzvah and only the mitzvah of Shabbos. But the Medrash means to say that the only pasuk we have evidence that mitzvahs were kept is the pasuk of Shabbos by Yosef. But not that the other ones didn't do the other mitzvahs. That's only what we have a pasuk for. But the Medrash meint nicht zu Shela sein dem Kiyum von Shara Mitzvahs al de Yosef. The Medrash does not mean to exclude, negate the observance of all mitzvahs through Yosef, und dem Kiyum von Mitzvahs Shabbos or Shara Mitzvahs al de Ashvatim, and to say that the other Shvatim, besides Yosef, did not fulfill the mitzvah of Shabbos, and other mitzvahs by the Shvatim. That's not what the Medrash is saying. Nor as Yosef's Shmiras Shabbos wird abgelernt from Pasuk. Medrash is just trying to say that we have a Pasuk for Yosef Shmiras Shabbos, Hado Omra. This says, Mashe Enkin the andere mitzvahs was Yosef hat Mekayim given, as opposed to the other mitzvahs that he fulfilled. Bal derech zeh, and similar to Yosef's doing other mitzvahs, as their key mitzvahs Shabbos, v'chol mitzvahs from kol hashvatim, the observance of Shabbos and all mitzvahs of all shvatim, is not meforish in pasuk. It's not clear in the pasuk. The Rebbe brings down another medrash, which also can be misinterpreted, but the Rebbe says the same meaning is over there as well in the other medrash. That inyan hanal, this above idea of emphasizing Yosef's Shmiras Shabbos, the Hadgosha, von der Meile von Shmiras Shabbos ali de Yosef, of the advantage that Yosef kept Shabbos, steht in Medrash Euch b'mokem achar. It also is stated in the Medrash in another place. On the verse it says, Mihig demani v'ashalim, that one who came ahead, Higdino was Magdim, I'll pay him. Eibishter says somebody came ahead. Yosef kept Shabbos before it was given. He came ahead. Medaber b'Yosef, it talks about Yosef, Shuhigdim v'shimer es HaShabbos ach lenitno, that he proceeded and he kept the Shabbos even before it was given. As he brings the posuk Tvayach Tavach v'Hochin, Tvayach Tavach, shechting and prepare. Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan erev Shabbos hoisa. It was before Shabbos. It was Friday. Ve'ein v'Hochin ela Shabbos. It says v'Hochin prepared. This was preparing for Shabbos. Shenemar, as the posuk said, v'Hoya b'Yom Hashvi Shishi ve'Echinu Gomer, that on Friday when they get the mon, they should prepare. Und der Medrash firtois, and the Medrash concludes, Amar HaKadosh Baruch, says Hashem, Yosef ato shomarto sashabes ad shelinitna Torah. You, Yosef, kept the Shabbos before the Torah was given. Chayecha, I swear by your life, shani mishalem leben bincha shehei makriv korbanoi b'Shabbos. I swear that your grandson will be bringing the korban b'Shabbos, because when it came to the Chanukas HaMizbeach and the tribe that came out on Shabbos was the descendant of Yosef. So the Eibishter says, you kept the Shabbos before it was given, I'm going to pay you back. Your grandson is going to be in the Korban Shabbos. So over here too, this, it would seem like it's saying to you that only Yosef got reward for keeping the Shabbos, so not the other ones. But the Rebbe says over here, it's also the same as we said before, that his Shmiras Shabbos somehow was on a higher level than the other ones. Not to say that they didn't keep the Shabbos. Let's look inside. From them, Medrash is mashmach, kehemshech lahanal. So in this Medrash, it appears as a follow-up to the above that they must have all kept all mitzvahs and the Shabbos. So why are we talking about Yosef's keeping the Shabbos? Why are we rewarding only Yosef? If, in fact, as the Rebbe said, lahanal, we said that Yosef and the brothers kept Shabbos. It's just that the pasuk here is as those was es wird ausgeteilt der Inyan Hashmirat von the Shabbos of Yosef. Why are we separating keeping the idea that Shabbos was kept by Yosef Is nit belois in them was by im is dos meforish in posuk. It's not just because it says in pasuk, because in this pasuk we're just not just saying that there's a pasuk for this. In this pasuk we're giving him reward for it. Nor as zayin shmiras Shabbos is given mit a Yisrain. It had an advantage. Keeping the Shabbos by Yosef was had an advantage. Legabe zayin kiyum von anderen mitzvahs. When we measure it relative to the performance of other mitzvahs, it was special. Und euch bejachas zum kiyum hamitzvahs und shar shvotim. And also in relationship, we measure the performance of Shabbos by Yosef. It was higher than the general observance of mitzvahs of the other tribe. Biz as als teitzoder fun, to such an extent it was greater. Hadavke ben benoishel Yosef zechigevan. It was specifically the grandson of Yosef merited. So aschar miyuchad of their shmiras Shabbos for a special reward for keeping the Shabbos. Va'adrab, on the contrary, dos is their tam was tafki. So what happens is, this is why the pasuk does signal out Yosef because of Yosef's special performance of the mitzvah. Uh, so not that the pasuk, from the pasuk we know, but the reason why the pasuk is written in order to tell us that Yosef's was greater. Adrabah, das is der tam was Davkev Shmira Shabbos from Yosef is Meforish Bekro, that specifically Yosef's keeping of the Shabbos is mentioned in the Pasuk. So we're remaining with the Rebbe's uh, interpretation that the Rebbe said that the Medrash is not excluding anyone, just saying that we find Yosef's keeping Shabbos in the pasuk. But why is Yosef's Shabbos in the pasuk? Because it was a special keeping of the Shabbos by Yosef. What is it though? Darf man verstehen, in was besteht der Ilui von Shmira Shabbos? The Yosef, what is the advantage of the keeping of Shabbos, of Shmiras HaShabbos, the Sh'ar HaShvotim, over keeping the Shabbos of the other Shvotim? And that advantage of these dos merumas in the Werter, utvayach tevach v'hochen. How is this hinted in the words of tvayach tevach v'hochen, which should tell us about this special Shabbos that was kept by Yosef that he prepared for the Shabbos? Um, the Rebbe learns now there is an idea of preparing for Shabbos. That's the positive. But the reason why we have to prepare is because you can't cook on Shabbos. So you have the positive, the preparation in order, that needs to be done on Friday in order to get ready for Shabbos. And then we have the fact that on Shabbos itself you can't cook. So the Rebbe is asking now, uh, why on the language of the Medrash base. Euch darf man verstehen, the Raya, we also need to understand the proof von ein v'hochein elo Shabbos. That's the Medrash by us. It says that v'hochein is Shabbos. Hochein is Shabbos. Hochein is Shabbos. As Shomar Yosef is a Shabbos, that Yosef kept the Shabbos. B'man learn b'pashtus, as you learn it on the simple, the Baal das Yosef hat angesagt, mir soll zugereiten dem Acholim auf Shabbos von Far Shabbos. Since Yosef instructed to prepare the food for Shabbos from before Shabbos, is araya is evident As b'yem HaShabbos atzmein hat men es nit gekonnt ton. That on Shabbos itself you cannot do it. The malacha from kochen, the malacha, the work of cooking is similar. You can't do it on Shabbos. That's what you're preparing. If ober is over bir, but if that is the entire idea over here, v'hochin, to prepare, this is the Pavos der inyan von kiyum mitzvah Shabbos by Yosefen. Why is the observance of the mitzvah of Shabbos by Yosef areis gebracht in Medrash be'akifin? Why is it brought down in a roundabout way? Bibal dazarat meichin given me'erev Shabbos l'Shabbos, since he was preparing from before Shabbos to Shabbos, is shmamino. So from this we see, as b'Shabbos gekon meichin sein, that he couldn't do it on Shabbos, he had to do it before Shabbos. Ton came malacha, that he couldn't do malacha. So the Torah brings it out through v'hoche. So you have to prepare for Shabbos. The Torah hat l'ch'eire gedarft uns der Zelun ki mitzvahs ha-Shabbos the Yosef b'ofen Yosher. The Torah Yosher should have told us in a direct way that Yosef kept the Shabbos not by, he prepared before Shabbos, so because he couldn't cook on Shabbos. Mitaloshin al derech ha-Mechilta, using a language as the Rebbe is going to quote now from the Mechilta, where it says directly that Yosef kept Shabbos. In Mechilta gefindt man as Take beifen sei. In Mechilta we find in such a way. Der Fund was Yosef hat Mechin gewähnt be'erev Shabbos, lernt man up. What do we learn from this that he prepared? As hat Mekayim gewähnt dem Onzog Zocher es Yom HaShabbos, that he fulfilled the command, remember the day of Shabbos. In the Aseres HaDibros it says you have to remember the day of Shabbos. So how do you remember the day of Shabbos? So that's a fulfillment of Shabbos by Zocher, by cooking out of Shabbos. Zocher Hashem HaShabbos. Was beniden the dan, ba'achona, in our case, when is it? In the preparation. How do you, is those shaykh davke far Shabbos, yimesachel be'erev Shabbos? So how could you keep the Shabbos? How could you? It has to be done. But you're doing a positive remembering the Shabbos. It's a Zocher Shabbos, not you're preparing because you can't cook on Shabbos. The actual achana is the mitzvah of remembering Shabbos. Zocher Hashem Shabbos. The Medrash says you prepared so that you can't cook on Shabbos, it looks like the Medrash is saying. But in the Mechilta, it says that this is the Zocher Hashem Shabbos. When preparing, you have to do it for Shabbos. You can't remember Yom HaShabbos on Shabbos itself to prepare because you can't cook on Shabbos. So that's fulfilling Zocher Hashem Shabbos. Is Zoshach Davke Far Shabbos Yemesach Be'erev Shabbos. Wie steht in Mechilta as from Posik Zocher v'goymer lernt man up that the Mechilta says that from Posik Zocher we learn that you should remember it even on the first day of the week, on Sunday. If a good portion comes across to you, you should prepare that, fix it for Shabbos. You should be keeping the Shabbos. So that's a positive way of keeping the Shabbos even in the weekday. That seems to be the Rebbe is asking a more appropriate way to talk about the keeping of Shabbos of Yosef, that he fulfilled Zocher Hashem Shabbos, that he's remembering Shabbos through his preparation, rather than saying Veichinu Asasher Yaviu, he's prepared because he can't cook on Shabbos. So why does the Torah, according to the Medrash, give us Yosef's mitzvah of Shabbos in such a way? And also, the Rebbe in the first ice wants to know, to begin with, why are we singling out the keeping of Shabbos of Yosef? Somehow the pasuk is written for Yosef because not the other ones didn't do this mitzvah, but Yosef did the mitzvah in an advantageous way. What is it? So now the Rebbe says that in the Medrash it says that Yosef kept the mitzvahs of Shabbos before it was given. Of course, before it was given. Why is he trying to tell us here? What's the emphasis before it was given? And the Rebbe brings out that the mitzvah of Shabbos, in essence, was there, but it wasn't given. While other mitzvahs weren't there b'chlal before they were. But here, only thing that was lacking was the giving of the Shabbos. Gimel. That man does verstehen behagdim habiur will understand this by introducing the explanation. Was der Medrash is moisif umadgish. The Medrash adds and emphasizes as Yosef Shmiras Shabbos is given koidem shaloi to nosen, that the keeping of Shabbos of Yosef was before it was given. The kosher. It's difficult. Why do we say that it was kept the Shabbos before it was given? Using the language that the Ifei use. Micah Mashmalon. What does he have to tell us this? What does he come to teach us? Pshita should be made Yosef Lenit Nadaim. It's obvious that in the days of Yosef it wasn't been given yet. The Yifei Tayar answered, what does he answer? He says, V'shemo mipnei shelech oide ha-yisur b'davor shleit nit nadaim. He's trying to tell you here, Medrash, because it would seem that perhaps there was a prohibition on Yosef keeping the Shabbos because it wasn't given yet. So you might think that how could he be keeping Shabbos? We know that a non-Jew that keeps the Shabbos, Torah wasn't given yet. They still had a status of Bnei Noach. How could they keep Shabbos? So the Ben Noach sheshomer as Shabbos chayiv misa. Maybe because you think there's an Isser, because it's not given yet, because a Ben Noach that keeps Shabbos is liable for death. So he couldn't keep Shabbos. Weil es steht noch far Matan Torah lo yishbaisu. Because before Matan Torah it says lo yishbaisu. You're not allowed to rest. May call you may. You can never stop. You always have to work. You can't rest on Shabbos. A Ben Noach is not allowed to rest on Shabbos. That preceded Matan Torah. Matan Torah changed for Yidden. So maybe Yosef couldn't have kept Shabbos. And still he kept the Shabbos. So that's what the Chiddush is, that he kept the Shabbos. But over there, so the Rebbe says then, instead of the Medrash emphasizing, well, it wasn't given yet, Lenitno, the Medrash should have said that it was given to the Bnei Yisrael later, if that was the issue. But if he said Darv Zayin Tehat Gosha, according to this, the emphasis should be nicht auf dem, was Mitzvah Shabbos is noch demol nicht gegeben geworden, not the fact that Shabbos has not yet been given, nor auf dem, was is gegeben geworden später zu Yidden Davke. It should have been emphasized they were given to the Yidden, so he should not have done the Mitzvah L'Chere Yosef, if that was the issue that we're trying to say, and still he did it. Not so much because the Torah wasn't given yet, no, but the Afal Pishule need no Torah, but to say the Torah was given later. So Yidden Davke, to the Yidden. Von der Inyan as Ben Noach Sheshavas Chayiv Misa, because this idea that Ben Noach is Chayiv Misa, if he's on Shabbos, he's doch nicht nor koidem Matan Torah. That's not only before Matan Torah, nor oich, achadish nit na Matan Torah. Stay halacha is not a lot of rest on Shabbos. Hat doch gedacht, stehen alosh na masim lozeh, so they should have stated So the chiddush is that it changed that when the Torah was given for a yid. V'sheshomer Yosef es Shabbos shenitna rak Yisrael. Medrash should have said that Yosef kept the Shabbos, which was only given to the yid, and still he kept the Shabbos. Instead of saying in the lashon of the Medrash, according to the Feiter, that loy nitna, which doesn't bring out the special change that takes place by Matan Torah when the Yidden got the Torah. So therefore, the Rebbe doesn't accept the explanation from the Feiter. The Rebbe gives another explanation. Yesh lemer debir bazeh. So the Rebbe says, what is the emphasis that we did know? Nisino ishaych zu zogun, wenn die gegebene Sache ist da bemetzias. Was saying that it wasn't given means that it existed, but it has not been given yet, but it exists. The nisina tutlois oif, when you say given, what does the giving accomplish? As the Zach wird herausgenommen von ein Mokum v'rishus, that the item is taken out from one place and one domain, und geht über in a zweite Mokum v'rishus, and it moves over to another place or domain, given from here to there. The Baal is madgish b'miyuchad by Shabbos, koidem shaloi tinosin. He's saying by Shabbos before it was given, actually nitna or before it was given, is move on as Shabbos is do from frier. So it's understood that Shabbos exists from before. Und sie wird gegeben, and it's given. What does this mean? So the Rebbe brings out that in the Medrash it says, actually nitna, which is obvious. What does he say in nitna? Because the Rebbe is explaining now what is the idea of nisina. Nisina means that it exists, but hasn't been given yet. That's Barabas. So what's the explanation? So the Rebbe will say Shabbos in essence was there, but it wasn't given yet. It didn't have yet the power for a yid to do it. The Eibishter, it existed. From the timing, that's Barabas, a Dalit. The time of mitzvah Shabbos, from the reasons for the mitzvah of Shabbos, Zechiras Shabbos, Shmiras Shabbos, remembering Shabbos, keeping Shabbos, Chulu, steht b'Torah. So the Torah says, Kisheishis Yomim Osa Hashem, Es HaShamayim V'es HaOretz. For 6 days, Hashem made the heavens and the earth. That is a Vayonach B'Yom HaShvi, and then he rested on the 7th day. Or another pasuk, B'Yom HaShvi, Shabbos Vayinofash, on the 7th day, he rested. Therefore, is move on. So from this is understood as gleich b'sheshis yimei bereshis, that immediately by the 6 days of the beginning of creation, Yishoin Shabbos given an ausgetelter Tag von the andere Yimei Shavua. Shabbos was a distinguished, separated day, different than all other days of the week. Und mit der Teure sagt gleich beparshas Bereshis betchilas habriya, as the Torah says immediately in the portion of Bereshis, in the beginning of the Bria. He rested on the 7th day from all his work. So right away then, Hashem blessed the 7th day. He sanctified him. For he rested on that day from all his work. So Hashem made the 7th day unique, distinguished it. Sees nor the only thing, so what happened? We had to wait for it. Was der Tzivui zu Eden, the command for the Eden, is given erst noch Yetzias Mitzrayim. That took place after they went out of Mitzrayim by Matan Torah, but when they were able to give the Torah, that's when the command came. But Shabbos was there. Ulifnei zeh b'mora. Mora, there were some mitzvahs that were given to the Yidden of Mora was Shabbos, which was La'achri Yetzias Mitzrayim. After Yetzias Mitzrayim, then there was Tzivui, the Eibishter telling Yidden to do mitzvahs, but Shabbos, Sheish Mei Bereshis, it was already by Kaddish Yosef, Baruch Elokim Hashem HaShvi. But the Rambam is Mevayir in Meir Nevuchim. The Rambam explains in Meir Nevuchim as the zwei Timing in mitzvahs Shabbos. The two reasons that we find about the mitzvahs of Shabbos in the Parsha in Yisro, the first Matan Torah, and then again in the Parshas Vaschanon in Mishnah Torah. B'dibros Rishonos state, so by the first Aseres HaDibros, the Parsha of Yisro, there it says, Ki sheishis yomim goimer. The reason is because the Eibshter created Os Hashem Shemayim V'Soretz for 6 days, and then he rested on the seventh day. Uve Mishnah Torah says, V'zocharto ke'eved Yisro b'Mitzrayim, al kein tzivcha Hashem elikecha. So over there, is as mipnei shehem lishnei aluli mischalfim. This is for two interchangeable that may change. Ki ha'olul, the causes, ki ha'olul b'maimer harishon hu kvoid hayoim v'higdiloi. What is written in the Posik, in the Aseres HaDibros, that Atzivcha Hashem Elikecho, the Sheish Yomim Tov, that is talking about the day, honor of Shabbos, and making the Shabbos great. Omnam Tite Lonu Toiras HaShabbos Vitzivosu Yisonu. That's Shabbos itself. But why did Hashem give us the laws of Shabbos and commanded Yisonu L'Shamrei? Who Olu Nimshach. So that is a reason, consequence that extends L'Sibes Havayisenu Avodim B'Mitzrayim, is because we were slaves in Mitzrayim. That's why Tzivcha Hashem Elikecha does haste. As der Tam V'Siba Favos Mitzvah Shmira Shabbos Yishayich Nor zu Eden und nicht zu Sha'ar Ha'am. Why is Shabbos belong only to Yidden and not to the other people? If Kvoid HaYom V'Higdiloi, Hagam as Euch Ze Seinen in Klal, they're also included von Kulom Nivru V'Nischatshu B'Maise Bereshis, they're all created and came about in the act of creation, is Mitzad Asher Hayesenu Avodim B'Mitzrayim, that because we were slaves in Mitzrayim, Asher Lo Hayinu Ovdim B'Ritzoynenu Ube'ez Shechavtzenu, we could not work when we want and at the time we desired. We couldn't rest. So the Eibishter says, I'll give you a day of rest. So that's why the Yidden get it. So you see in the Ram, it's not actually in it's by Mishnah Torah in the Parshas Vaschanan, the second pasuk that we're talking about. But the two aspects over here. One aspect is talking about Shabbos itself. That's in creation. And that's something which everybody is part of. But why did you didn't get the mitzvah of Shabbos? Why does it come to us? Because we were slaves in Mitzrayim and we couldn't rest. So they usually give us a day of rest. Is verstandig. So based on this understood, mitvos is far Matan Torah. How before Matan Torah, mitzvah Shabbos given ausgeteilt. The mitzvah of Shabbos was distinguished from Sha'ar mitzvahs HaTorah, from the other mitzvah of the Torah. Andere mitzvahs, other mitzvahs, is their mitzias neschadish geworden beis Matan Torah. Their entity, they were created, the whole essence of that mitzvah came about by Matan Torah. Far dem seien sie nicht gewesen begeder mitzias. Before that, they did not exist. Achefzo bifnei atzmo, achefzo shel mitzvah. They weren't an object on their own. There was no object. Achefzo shel mitzvah. It was no object of a mitzvah before there's a mitzvah. When the mitzvah came about, that's when the object became the mitzvah. Bekim ha-mitzvah lifnei Matan Torah. How did we do the mitzvah before Matan Torah? Is given nora pu'ulas ha'odom. It's the person acted, but there was no object over there. Maisa Hanivra, there was the act of the human being. Mashenke Shabbos, as opposed to Shabbos. Because there's man for Yom HaShvi ausgezählt mitzad der Bria. The time of Shabbos is distinguished because of creation. Der Vayonach Bayem, dem Vayonach Bayem HaShvi. The Eibishter rested on the seventh day. That's how the entity, the Metzius of Shabbos, kommt to us. Turns out, as the Chefze from Yom HaShabbos, Ishen Gewenich Kein Matan Torah, that the object of the day of Shabbos was there before Matan Torah. From Zint Sheishis Yemei Bereshis, from since these 6 days of creation. Nor sie ist noch nicht gewähnt der Zivui zum Gabriel. But the command to the Gabriel, to the Eden, was not there. Ubemele nicht gewähnt, and therefore there was an object, but there was no chefza, the mitzvahs Hashem lo Adam. There was no object from Hashem's command to the person. The object was there before. But this object, the other mitzvahs, there was no object there. But in here, there was the object. There was the seventh day. But this object didn't have the mitzvah Hashem to the person. And based on this idea that Shabbos in essence was there, explains, also sweetens another idea, was der Inyan as Shabbos hot nit kein Sheiches zum Bnei Noach. What do we know, as we quoted earlier, that Shabbos is not for Bnei Noach? There are not a lot of rest in Shabbos. How do we learn this? Wird abgelernt von B'yom v'layla lo yishbaisu. That they are Yom v'layla lo yishbaisu. So, but if there was no Shabbos before Matan Torah, how could we learn for the Bnei Noach? It says day and night they shouldn't rest. But there was no Shabbos yet. But because there was already Shabbos in principle, and we learn from this, so because already, technically, there was a Shabbos already there. But the Torah tells Yom v'layla lo yishbaisu already Rabbi Neuchen. V'bal the chefs of Shabbos shindam was given because the object of Shabbos already existed. Hey, this is the pirush. So the Rebbe brought out over here, based also on the Rambam, but the Lashner and Nevuchim, that Shabbos existed from. It's only a matter of having to give the Shabbos. Shabbos existed before. Other mitzvahs didn't exist before they became a mitzvah. Shabbos existed before. And the only thing is, later on it became a mitzvah. Und das ist der Pirush, was man sagt bei Shabbos im Loschen, koidem shaloi tinos and achalei nitno, in the Loschen, the Medrash, before it was given. Before given, meaning there existed. Giving is what took place. Even before the command for keeping Shabbos, is Shabbos given a Metzias. Shabbos was an entity. Und noch mehr, in selben Mahus wie später. It didn't change. It remained the same entity as before. That noch the Nesina, even after given, it's not that there is a difference in the Shabbos, in the entity of Shabbos. So Yom Shvisim in Malacha, there's a day of resting of Malacha. That's the day of Shabbos. Nor damot is given in another Hecher Rishus. It was in a higher domain. Rishus HaNoisin, it was in the domain of the giver. Shabbos is given as man miyuchad. Shabbos was a singled out, a special time. The far was the Eibishter. Had them talk kabiyachol shlevis given memalachtes. So to speak, the Eibishter rested that day from his work. So that was for Hashem. The Noisen, the giver, had the Shabbos. Then he went and gave it. Nisinas HaShabbos, giving the Shabbos, what Ovgiton, what that accomplished as the Zol Ibergame Rishus HaNoisen, Oichsum Rishus HaMakabel, that they should transfer from the domain of the giver Hashem also to the domain of the recipient. Das heißt, die Schwissa soll ankommen zum Nivra. That means that that resting should reach zum Gavra, to the person. So the Eden Dolomata to the here, that he should also get this Shvisa that the Eibishter already has and was given over also to the person. There's his given is Sinas Shabbos. Before the giving of Shabbos. From them, from the one who rested on Shabbos, which was Hashem. Before Hashem, who rested on Shabbos, gave it, it had no connection to anyone else, just Hashem's. Signan Acham, different style. Anivra hat nicht dem Koyach zu öfton, als bei ihm soll sein der Zman HaShabbos, me'ein ze vidos is beim Beide. A created being has not the power to accomplish that by him, the time of Shabbos should be like by Hashem's Shabbos. You can't make yourself a Shabbos like by Hashem. Ubemela hot kein Ort nit as soll sheve sein mit Melocha. So it doesn't really make no room. There's no place for such an idea that he should rest in Melacha. Why are you resting Melacha? The Eibishter is resting. What kind of connection is it to you? By Matan Torah, hat sich aufgetan Hanesina bechlalu beproteo, when it's been given over with all the details. Ayos as be Matan Torah is bot geworden die Gzeira. Since the Matan Torah, the decree that there is a separation. The upper ones can come down to the lower ones. Ubefrat b'negei Shabbos, especially as Shabbos, that now it came down that the Yidden could rest on Shabbos. Is aderech v'mila is geworden nach Chayfetz the mitzvah noch fahren Matan Torah. Similar, Mila was an object of a mitzvah before Matan Torah. He says, Simno yotcho tachas yirechi. So the mitzvah of Mila was an object of Chayfetz mitzvah, even before Matan Torah. So it says, in Aseres Adibus Kasher Tzivcha, word Tzivcha b'moro, angesagt geworden dem Gavra. So the Eibishter told it to the person. The Eibishter hat gegeben zu Eden Odem Zman für Yom HaShvi. The Eibishter gave the Yidden this time of the seventh day, the Shabbos, the Chefza von Shabbos. Azoi, he gave this object as the Zolzaina Chefza the Mitzvah Ba'em. It should be an object of mitzvah by the person. Poil Zain in a Yidden Dolamata to impact in a Yid over here below. So you becomes Bris Milah, just like by Bris Milah becomes how did the Mitzvah Milah become an object of a mitzvah? Because the Eibishter commanded it. So similarly, the Eibishter, when it comes by Shabbos, and the Eibishter told us about the keeping of the mitzvah of Shabbos, that makes the mitzvah of Shabbos that a Yid impacts in the Chefza over here. So here the Rebbe explains now that this was the Shabbos of Yosef, that him, it was actually a Chefza, not just the Gavra, not just the person doing Shabbos. Just like by Matan Torah, we said there was a whole new level in the keeping of Shabbos. We got the Hefza of Shabbos as a mitzvah. The Eibishter gave it to us when the Gzeira was bottled. But by Yosef, he actually had it even before. That was his Maila. Yeshleimer Vo. You can say, as in them is Bashtanen, the Yisra Maila for Shmiras Shabbos, the Yosef, the additional advantage of keeping Shabbos of Yosef, Lagabe Shmiras Shabbos for the Shar Shvotim, relative to the keeping of Shabbos of the other Shvat for the Shvotim. Das was the Oves zu Shvotim haben Mekayim given mitzvahs. Eider sei seinen Nitztabe geworden. The fact that the forefathers and the Shvotim observed mitzvahs before they were commanded, it does given a viful Ulas Odom Kenoifton only to the extent that the act of a person can do. Kann aber nicht Mishane sein, die Metzies Viteva von der Chefza, but he has not the ability to change the entity, the nature of the object, wie sie ist beschaffen geworden, then it was created. You can't change that. You can do, but you can't change it. Nicht a Chefza, not an object. Matzah ukayetze bei ausgeteilt durch Seir Paula. It can't become an object distinction through their act. You're going to eat the matzah on Pesach. You can't change the object of the matzah to change it around. The person doesn't have that ability. You can't change it from andere chafotzim, which is matzah shekamayo. You can't see a different, another looking matzah. This is a matzah, this is a matzah. You can't make a different. This matzah cannot get a separate entity than a regular other matzah. Chefza the mitzvah, you can't make it an object of mitzvah. And similar was the resting of Shabbos by the Shvotim. As is blois apula shel hagavra, that it's only an act of the person. Of the chefza for Shabbos al Siman, but the object of Shabbos as a time, haben sie nicht gekannt, mishane sein, they could not change it. Their shvisa meloch is given, blois asiman, when they rested of work, they didn't change the time that they were resting. It's blois asiman of Kibbutz Shabbos. It was a sign that Hashem rested, but not, it didn't have the entity, the object of Shabbos. Mashenkim by Yosef, as opposed to Yosef, Zayin Shmiras Shabbos is mefurish b'Torah. His Shmiras Shabbos is mefurish in Torah. Vertes amitzius be'olam, that becomes an entity in the world. Va'adra amitzius nitzchis, it remains, not just, it remains eternity. So by Yosef it was different. The Shabbos became an object of Shabbos. And that's why there's a Maila in Yosef's keeping of Shabbos, because he was able to change the entity of the seventh day to make it into a Shabbos. Why Epis Yosef? So what's the reason why Yosef specifically? Says Yodua the Maila for Yosef, Lagabe Shara Shvotim, because we know that Yosef had an advantage over the other tribes. The Shvotim seinen given royet soin. They fed the sheep. They were pasturing the sheep. Was das is in an Eifen, was is goydem his boydedus. That brings about the separation, being alone. Und Abgetrogenheit von Enyonehoilim, being removed from worldly matters. Der Far is their peulis. Therefore, their actions, Koilo Shemiras Shabbos, including the Shemiras Shabbos, Abgetrogen from Welt, it was removed from the world. Zeir boy shavas, they're resting, hat nit mishane gewend dem Zman von Olam, that didn't change the time of the world. Mashenkin, dabei von Yosef, as opposed to this service of Yosef, is given in Mitzrayim. Ervasores, in the Mitzrayim, in the nakedness of the land. Und nicht norot Mitzrayim im nit gestört in seiner Avodas Havaya. Not only did Mitzrayim not disturb him in his service of Hashem, nor zayindik in Mitzrayim is given being Mitzrayim. So Mitzrayim didn't interfere with his service of Hashem, but he became the ruler over Mitzrayim. Nor zayindik in Mitzrayim is given the Moishel V'Shalit of Mitzrayim. He was the ruler and the dominator over Egypt. Nobody can raise a hand or a foot in all of Eretz Mitzrayim. So he was fully in charge. Nitnor b'negeya gashmis by Yishbar the Mitzrayim, not only physically that he provided for the food for Mitzrayim, nor also spiritually. He accomplished that they all had to circumcise. So what was Yosef's avodah? Yosef was engaged. He was engaged. The Shvatim were removed from the world. Yosef was engaged in the world. He was engaged in Mitzrayim, and he impacted Mitzrayim. And since as he was below Mitzrayim, is dort Gufo, und dort Gufo noch zayendik beweis Adonu ha-mitzvahs, and even in Mitzrayim itself, before he became even Mishnah Lamelech, while he was in the home of his Egyptian master, Faru Bilodecha, before we came to the level that nobody can do anything without Yosef. Yosef's power was there. Is Vayhi Hashem as Yosef. Hashem was with Yosef. Hatzir by him and in em. So by him and in him, Tzavso v'chibur, that connection, togetherness, because Hashem was with Yosef. That means he was together and connected, Hashem with Yosef, onger the Shabbos from Eberstein. So he was sent the Shabbos of Hashem. Kivei Shavas Mekom Malachta, Hashem rested Mekom Malachta, because of that special connection that Yosef has with Hashem. The Chefza for Shabbos LaHashem, the object of Shabbos LaHashem. His keeping of Shabbos before it was giving in sich gehat, it had mein amayla from Shmira Shabbos was noch Matan Torah, similar to the advantage of the Shabbos that followed Matan Torah. So the Rebbe explains that Yosef's Maila was that it was the Chefetz of Shabbos. It came about because the Torah discusses Yosef's keeping of Shabbos. It was in a unique way, in the way that he actually observed Shabbos, in a way that it became the entity like we have after Matan Torah. He was Kimei Lifnei Matan Torah, just like after Matan Torah. It was the entity of the Chefetz of the Shabbos day. And the reason the Rebbe explains, because Yosef's being engaged in the world, and Vayhi Hashem es Yosef, even before that, Yosef's special connection gave him the ability to connect that resting, that Hashem rests should actually be his resting as well. And it had the advantage, Shmira Shabbos, which all of us, even the Shvatim, can only get that high level after Matan Torah. And now the Rebbe explains why it's expressed in the preparation, why it's expressed in the non-work on Shabbos versus the positive of the preparation on Friday. Zayin. Al Pizeyesh Levayir, based on this we can explain, was the Torah Megala given them inyan for Shmiras Shabbos to Yosef, that the Torah revealed Yosef's the keeping of Shabbos davke durch dem Loshon v'hochein, specifically through the language v'hochein, preparing. Was weist kenal, which points, as said before, Oifen v'hoya b'yoyim hashishi v'yichinu goymer, that on the sixth day they need to prepare. It shows about the preparing goymer for Shabbos. Der Heder und Shvisa mimlocha b'yoyim haShabbos atzmei, when the knot, when not the lack, the absence, when we rest of the absence of work on Shabbos, b'yom haShabbos atzmei, on Shabbos itself, brengt arois dem shinui behagavra, that expresses, that brings out the change in the person. Der Odom, the person, is in dem tog noch v'shavas v'melachte. The person on that day is resting. He's relaxing. He's not doing. Davke de peula from the Achona me'erev Shabbos l'Shabbos, but when you prepare from before Shabbos for Shabbos, tut oifen chefza oilam uzman oilam, that is what accomplishes in the object of the world and in the time of the world. There is an impact, a connection to the world. As mitzad der Anderskeit von Shabbos, that because Shabbos is different, is man sich zu ihm meichen noch von früher, so you prepare yourself from before, or poil in Welt, and you impact the world. You need to do something, the activity, v'yesh leimer oid yiseder mizeh, apulen msheches b'yem Shabbos. It's a work that continues, not you have to do in the world from before Shabbos, but there is a work, but there's a continuous impact, a continuous effect on Shabbos. Wie das wird herausgebracht euch in Halacha. Also in Halacha we see that from Hoya, Bayoim, Hashishi, Vechinu, Goyim, Learned Benop, we learn out from the Pasuk that what you prepare on Friday for Shabbos, we learn out Nit azoi, nit nor, as medarf mechi sein auf Shabbos bepeula. Not only that you have to prepare for Shabbos by an act, backen and kochen, to bake and to cook me by Yom from daytime. Das steht beferish in Pasuk. That is beferish in the Pasuk. Eis asher toifu, eifes asher tevashelu bashelu. What you bake, you cook, you cook. That's not so much v'hoyu b'yem hashishi. Nor from them zetmen. But what do we see from this? Nita, not so much that it's not, but as achsheve rachmono l'sudas Shabbos, that the Torah made important the Suda Shabbos to go ahead and sheyas meneno b'fiv mibayyomu b'choil, to prepare it with your mouth from the daytime and the weekday, to prepare it for Shabbos, to do something. Heichinu, that there should be a preparation. The Rebbe says it's not just the actual physical bake. That says in the pasuk, baking and cooking should be done before. But the veichinu part means you got to prepare for Shabbos, that the Torah makes it important to make this food for Shabbos. Der veichinu es asher yaviu bringt arois. When you prepare that which you bring, it expresses asuda Shabbos, vos me'est in Shabbos, that the meal of Shabbos that you eat in Shabbos is achsuda chashuva, that is an important meal. The riber is the Torah meram, is the meaning for Shmira Shabbos, the Yosef in Lashon Hachona. That's why the Torah hints the Shmira Shabbos of Yosef in the language of Hachona. While the Yisrein umayla from Zayin Shmira Shabbos, because the advantage, the Maila, the greatness of his keeping of Shabbos is bestanden in them, consistent in the fact was durch him, that through him, und in him, and in him is der Tag geworden Yom HaMichud, came a special day. Das heißt, is given the Chefza, it was the object from Vayonach Vayom Hashvi, resting on the seventh day. But does Zoktzich Kamur in the Minyan Hachana Davke, that expresses itself specifically in the preparation. The preparation gives us that impact that there is an object over here. The Rebbe explained that the specialty of Shabbos by Yosef, Rebbe explained why Yosef, because Yosef was on this Madrega, Hashem is this Yosef, and he was involved. So it's all the idea of the Chefza. He merited to have the Chefza of Shabbos, and the Torah tells us about it. That's why the Torah writes about it, because he had a special Shabbos of keeping, while the others could only get the Gavra. They kept the Shabbos, but they couldn't change the day. But how does the Torah express that there was a change in the Chefza from Yosef by Hachoneh? If the Torah says that you can't cook on Shabbos, that would be not. But we're talking about positive, because we're talking about the Chefza. And that is expressed through Hachoneh, through preparation. Achsheve, you give it an importance, the meal of Shabbos from before Shabbos. This is the Chefza, because this is the specialty of the keeping of Shabbos of Yosef. Ches. Kishem v'sizani gewendet zwei Erfahrungen anal von Shmira Shabbos lefnei Matan Torah. Just as before Matan Torah was the two ways of keeping Shabbos, similar to this, there's also exists after Matan Torah the Chefetz of Shabbos and the Gabra of Shabbos. Is do Shabbos wie sie ist gegeben geworden bedibur begoli b'pshat halacha. There's Shabbos the way it was given in speech openly in the meaning of halacha. Shvisa b'Shabbos memalocha. That means resting Shabbos from doing work, literally. And there is a level of shomer, keeping the Shabbos in the inner way, resting from physical talk. Not only not to talk too much on Shabbos, but in a way of resting. Rebbe quotes from the Tanya, not to speak any wasteful talk, God forbid. This type of resting, was by Eden Herzachon. That comes from the fact that a Yid senses the Shvisa from the Ebersten. Hashem's resting, nor the Shvisa von Asiyas Shemayim Voros Gashmiyim, not only the resting from making, of creating the heavens and the physical world, nor Kemoy Sheshavas Havayim Meyud Mamoris, just as he rested from the 10 sayings. Those were sayings Hashem with which he created the world. Shenivru B'hem Shemayim V'Oretz, with which he created the world. This is from the Alter Rebbe in the Kutter Sachre. Ukshem with the Shleimus from Shmiras Shabbos Lifnei Matan Torah by Yosef. Just as the completeness, the wholesomeness of keeping Shabbos before Matan Torah by Yosef is weil by ihm hat sich angehört der Kivoi Shabbos von Ebersten, is because by him it was sensed that by Shabbos from Ebersten, he filled the Ebersten's by Shabbos, that was his Chefza, Havaya Imoi. Similar is to keeping of Shabbos after Matan Torah. As the Shomer Shabbos Kil Chosim, one who keeps Shabbos the way it should be, according to the halacha fully, is Shoivas nit blois mimaisim gashmi, or the burim gashmi. Not only does he rest from physical actions and physical speech, nor by im ver der Herr kaviyochel, but he sort of senses the shvisa von Ebersten, the resting of Hashem, bis zu der pnimius, the inner of it. He senses that Hashabbos, pnimius Hashabbos, yakavona betfilas Hashabbos, that is the kavona that you have during the Shabbos davening, ubetalmud Torah, and learning to dovka b'avaya chod, to connect to Hashem Echad, Kimeshikos Shabbos L'Hashem Elikecha. The Shabbos is for God, your God. So it's a Shabbos, it's a davening for Hashem. That's the way to keep Shabbos Kil Chosei, which means to have that connection to Hashem. But does bring miyad. This brings immediately to Gula Hamitis Vashlemo. Aydei Mashiach Tzidkenu, the true and complete redemption through Mashiach Tzidkenu K'maimer Azal. As our sages say, Molim Mishamrim Yisrael Shtei Shabbos Kil Chosem. They keep both two Shabboses. Vados is Meshach Hazman von Ein Shabbos. Explained in the Kutetera that this is really two Shabbos, is the two levels of Shabbos, which is really one Shabbos, as the Rebbe brings the notes here from the Kutetera. Von Ein Shabbos is Miyad Nigolim, immediately they will be redeemed. This is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Metzora Tavshin Bemal.